Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Akshay. I'm going to be your co-host and co-moderator. And with me, I have Amarendra and Ashita, who are going to be the co-moderators with me. And without further ado, I would like to ask Shrishti, our guest speaker for the day, to introduce herself and just tell us a bit about you, and then we can get started with the session.
Yeah, hi everyone. Nice to see so many people joining. Yeah, so I can give a little bit of an introduction. Thank you for having me today. Yeah, so just to give you a sort of recap of my life so far, I was born in and brought up in India. Did all of my schooling in India and then moved to Singapore for my undergraduation in computer science and business. And right out of university, my first job was in a bank. Absolutely hated it. Quit in 10 months and was lucky enough that a manager from a previous internship asked me to join his startup consultancy as a data scientist, which I really enjoyed actually. I was like the seventh employee there and worked in a small boutique consultancy in Singapore for about 2 years. Really enjoyed that, but saturated in learning after about 2 years and was like, okay, what's next? So I applied for the MBA. This was, I think, 2020 or 2019. And I updated my resume, applied, and I was also listening to a lot of music at that time. And so one of my favorite companies was Spotify. So I was like, okay, I've updated my resume now, so I might as well also just resume drop. So I applied to Spotify in Singapore and in Sweden. And by some stroke of luck, both the MBA worked out. I got an interview with Spotify and also heard back from them at the same time. And just in the background, there was COVID lurking a little bit. This was March 2020. So I decided to then defer my MBA. And I was like, okay, you know what? Like, it doesn't make sense to do remote learning anyway. And I moved to Sweden in the middle of the pandemic in 2020. And then fast forward from there, I worked a year in Spotify and then moved to Chicago August 2021. And yeah, I spent about 2 years at Booth, wanted to transition into a more strategic role while still being very technical, still keeping my data science background, didn't want to lose all of that. And so I applied mainly to work in the digital practice of consulting firms. So McKinsey, BCG, they all have digital practices these days. And now I'm going to start working in Amsterdam next week, actually. So that's been my journey over the last couple of years. And then yeah, happy to take any questions. And then outside of work, of course, I love hiking. I love the outdoors. I'm a total outdoors person. Like love camping, all of that, and love music, of course. Yeah.
That's great. I think interesting that with the pandemic that happened, I think a lot of things changed dynamically for most people, and I think you made the most out of that situation. And Spotify sounds incredible. So, okay, on that note, I think we have a lot of interesting questions coming your way. We can get started with Ashita if you want to take the first question. Also, before that, I would like to ask everyone else who wants to ask questions, please put it up in the chat. And once we cover a few questions, we will take some questions from the chat as well, and we will ask Srishti those as well. So please feel free to type in whatever questions you have.
Yeah, thanks, Akshay. Thanks, Srishti. Welcome, and thank you for doing this. So, our first question was, a lot of us, when we are selecting the B school, we look at the location as well because that impacts the opportunities that we get. So, we just want to know, like, how did you find Chicago as a city in terms of professional opportunities, as well as, um, like, for staying there?
Yeah, that's a good first question. Yeah, Chicago is a really good city. I mean, it's one of the biggest cities, the third biggest city in the US. I really liked it actually as a place to do my MBA because I think it was like best of both worlds in terms of being a world-class city. You have the best restaurants, you have the best bars, you have the best sort of events city-based events, which is what the MBA is about, right? Like networking, meeting people, so you have the best places to do that. And secondly, it's a great professional hub as well. So it was quite, in terms of networking, it was quite handy to be able to go to the, let's say, the BCG office, or to go to a McKinsey event, right? Because we were not like located in a town super far away from the offices. So Chicago is definitely great most of the year, but it's definitely like not a winter city. It is freezing cold, like, yeah, 7, 8 months of the year. So that's definitely something to keep, to be mindful of. But still, I really enjoyed my MBA experience in Chicago.
Thank you.
Amar, you want to?
Yeah, so just like all others, like many of us, we have our post MBA goal as to be management consultants. So, what would you say, in your opinion, would be like the pros and cons of the industry, in especially, I mean, the management consulting? So, what would you suggest? I mean, what would you say?
Yeah, I think there's some very general pros and cons that, yeah, everyone talks about. So I can talk about that a little bit. Yeah, the biggest pro is that you really get very broad exposure to a broad set of industries. I mean, you are basically shifting from project to project. And in my internship last year, I actually was able to work first with a telecom company and then with like a large sort of beer manufacturer. So that really exposes you to different paths and different industries, and lets you use your expertise across industries. So that also means that you're learning a lot, because you're not sort of ingrained in one function or one department or one industry the whole time. And in terms of the cons, of course, like on the flip side, because you're shifting industry so often or shifting projects so often, and I'm sure a lot of you have heard this before, but it sort of takes away from being able to have a long-term impact sometimes. Of course, if you have a more of an operator role in a startup or a company over the long term, then you can see how what you're doing is impacting the company, consumers, and society at large. But sometimes that can be difficult for a consultant to do. And then another one I think is just the work-life balance, right? Going from tech at Spotify to consulting, I really saw a huge shift. Like I was working, yeah, 9 to 6 days in Sweden, and then suddenly consulting, of course, is very much, it's hard to expect that 9 to 5 lifestyle, and you really have to hustle and work, like 5 days a week, probably 60 hours, 60 to 70 hours. So it's not as bad as banking, but it's definitely not a sustainable work-life balance for most people. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a question for you. So since you've traveled to many cities in your career and your entire journey, like from India to Singapore to Sweden and then to the US, now back to Amsterdam. So how is life in each of those cities? Can you paint a picture of what it is like in Asia and then in the US and then in Europe for people who are looking
Yeah.
at fields?
Yeah, that's an interesting question because it is really, really different. Yeah, I mean, again, like Europe, like in Sweden, they almost like there's different forms of even capitalism, if I may say, in all of these cities, and you really see that. I mean, in Singapore, it's sort of state run and everything. It's state run capitalism, if you may say. Like the government is very involved, and everything feels very safe and comfortable. So Singapore was definitely a great place to be in my comfort zone and learn while I'm in my comfort zone. And then yeah, Sweden is again super different because it's not as capital. It is still capitalistic, but they call it like cuddly capitalism. When my salary was probably not that different, like not super different from a server's. Like the salary differences aren't huge. So again, that means that everyone feels safer and secure, and it's just people care more about sustainability, and because all of their basic needs are met, and so they can actually think about what they want to do. And then the US, I mean, I think most people are familiar, like yeah, it is a land of opportunity, and make what you want of that. You can go from 0 to 100 really quickly, but also from 100 to 0 really quickly. Yeah, I mean, I guess I chose Europe because lifestyle wise, I enjoyed it the most. But I mean, opportunities, of course, opportunity wise, people do say that the US is the best and you can earn the most in the US, but I really think you should optimize for what you value as an individual. Like if you value like working at a certain company or certain industry or a certain kind of lifestyle, then you should go for like think about it consciously. And for me, I valued, working in consulting and having a sustainable work-life balance. And for that, like Amsterdam is one of the best offices to be in, and your European lifestyle is generally a bit slower paced than the US and then Singapore as well. So I think it's a very important choice what city you live in. So it's very important to sort of think about what you value even before you start your MBA, actually, because then you'll have a clearer, when you go into the MBA, you'll have a sort of clear sort of idea of which city you want to apply to, let's say for consulting or for tech. And then you can sort of make your choices depending on your priorities.
Thank you.
So, Srishti, from what we've heard, Booth has a very flexible curriculum. I believe apart from the lead program, like everything else is elective based. So we just wanted to know, how did you take advantage of the flexibility that the curriculum offered you?
Yeah, so that was one of my favorite things about Booth. There are only 3 mandatory courses. I think it's accounting, economics, and statistics. And apart from that, you can basically tailor your curriculum. So I can talk about like 3 ways I took advantage of that. So the first one is that you have these lab classes at Booth. So they're really like flexible classes that allow you to practically sort of apply what you learn theoretically in class. So just to give you an example, I did the venture capital lab, which meant that I was attending a lecture every week, like a 3-week lecture, while doing a venture capital internship. So then the class is not just about like attending lectures or purely like theoretical learning. You can apply what you learned practically, either with a company like a venture capital firm in this case, but you also can do it with tech companies, for example, or like people who are interested in social impact could choose to do it with nonprofits. So that way, I think that was one of the coolest parts of the flexible curriculum. And then secondly, I did an exchange in London with the London School of Economics. I think a lot of schools might offer an exchange, but I thought that was really nice to be able to spend a quarter abroad in a new city and just experience life in a new city is something that I really still value, even having lived in many cities. I think it's always something new and a new learning experience. And then thirdly, like just being able to take classes like that challenged my thinking, right? Like there was a class called Perspectives in Capitalism. Completely random, like, class has nothing to do with business. Well, it has a lot to do with business, but not your traditional business class. So just being able to take classes like that, not being forced to take like competitive strategy or just very traditional business classes, something I really valued at this phase in my career. Like I didn't want to do the same set of 10 classes that I'd done in my undergrad and that would use some traditional cases. Instead, I wanted to like venture out of my comfort zone and do a class in AI or like, I don't know, Web3. Like now there's a class even in generative AI and climate change. So there's so much you can learn, and the flexibility that Booth offers really sort of lets you do that without feeling guilty. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really nice to know. Thank you.
So, hi, Srishti. So, you have been in multiple roles from data scientist to MBA candidate and now a management consultant. So, how would you say the transition has been so far from data scientist to MBA candidate and now management consultant?
It's a good question. So I think from a data scientist to an MBA candidate is just sort of like going back into being a student. which is interesting because an MBA experience is so different from like another master's, right? It is really about networking and less about like studying or grades, or it's not that academic. So I mean, I think that was a relatively easy transition. Like if you are so like you just have to make an effort to get to know people and be social, and that's how you sort of find jobs and build your network. So I think for me that was okay. It was not a big transition. And then from data science to consulting, I think that's a bigger transition because a data science job, you spend maybe 1 hour or 2 hours of your day talking to people, and then you try and like really engage in some deep work. Whereas consulting can be quite challenging because you spend most of your day talking to people, and it's harder to find that time for deep work. So it is, the two job scopes are just very different, and I think that's a transition that I'm still very much getting used to, just because sometimes people don't like to go in depth, whereas if you're doing data science, you're naturally going in depth. If you don't go in depth, then yeah, it's sort of like you don't just scratch the surface of something, whereas consultants can often sort of just scratch the surface of something or just flash numbers, but then you have to remind yourself that this is about the big picture. It's not really about going super, super deep into something. So I think that transition can be challenging for, yeah, personally, but I mean, people are often supportive, and of course, yeah, you get used to it with time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Sushri, thanks.
Yeah.
So the MBA is all about, for most people, it's about making lifelong bonds with people and making a lot of, core memories. So what has been your favorite memory from your MBA? And could be like an academic one, maybe like a social one, something that
Yeah, I
has
think,
affected
yeah.
you.
So hands down, like favorite memory at Booth has been living in the same building as my classmates. So like 50 to 70% of Boothies live in the same building in the city center. It's called the Millennium Park Plaza. So if you speak to any other Boothie and you just say, do you know MPP? Like memories will just come flashing back because it's literally like even in the middle of winter, like we go to each other's places for like dinner or like game nights or just random parties. Like we have done so much, like Boothis have done so much in that building. Like all of my great good memories with friends. Just I used to go to a friend's place just for dessert sometimes, or for tea, or just for like party hopping. Like I don't think our neighbors really liked us, but I think my favorite memory has definitely been in living in a city but in the same building, which makes it sort of feel like a dorm but like in a big city. And that's quite unique about Booth, I think.
That's, it's very, sounds fun. Thank you.
Yeah.
Srishi, Chicago Booth is, one of the top B schools in US and in fact in the world. So we just wanted to know how has the Chicago Booth brand helped you so far in your journey?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So I think in recruiting wise, I've already seen the Chicago Booth brand be super helpful. I wanted to recruit into Amsterdam after my MBA. My partner is actually Dutch. So I reached out to, there are very few alums in Amsterdam actually. So I was like, I don't know how difficult it's going to be, but I reached out to like a handful of alums that do live in Amsterdam, and the response rate was pretty much 100%. Like I heard back from each one of them. Each one of them wanted to help me with the recruiting process and with reaching out or connecting me to the BCG recruiter here in Amsterdam, or helping me practice for cases, etc. And I also saw that like even reaching out to people in other cities like Singapore, or people were just tended to be super responsive. Like I don't think there was a single person that I didn't hear back from. And I think that's really like the beauty of the Booth community, like this pay it forward culture, because everyone receives the help, and then so everyone feels like obliged to give it back to the next sort of generation or the next class. And then also like another thing is the VC internship that I did. That actually came from a Boothie. So the partner who was in the venture capital firm had actually gone to Booth many years ago. And that's why he came to Booth to recruit. So you sort of see that playing out in recruitment. I mean, socially as well, you do have alums coming back quite a lot to the building or to parties in the building. So sometimes you tend to bump into alums who live in Chicago anyway, like during parties or events. So I would say that it is really like the community is very tightly knit. And then of course, like it is hard to find a big community outside of the US because most people do tend to be in the US, but you can of course then if it's fewer people on the plus side, then it's a more tighter knit community and you can do more things together. So yeah, that's what it's been like for me. But of course I just graduated, so too early to say.
Yeah, thank you.
So Srishti, Booth is actually quite famous for consulting in particular. So how would you say the resources at Booth in particular helped you so far in your journey as a management consultant?
So the resources at Booth are pretty much top notch. Like it is, if you choose to come to Booth to recruit for consulting, I would say you're set, right? Because you have the consulting club, which has been running for years now. So they have a playbook. They have all the resources that you would need to network with companies, to set up coffee chats, to interview, to case. Everything is sort of like a well-running machine. And what that means is basically you don't need to prepare that much before you come into business school because they will guide you through the whole process of recruiting. And the success rate speaks for that, right? I think 200 people were in the club when I was recruiting, and about 100 of them had MBB offers. And the other 100 probably had like other consulting firms. So I think the success rate is quite high as well. If you follow what the club says and if you just give your best, it's very likely that you'll end up with a good offer.
Thank you, Srishti.
Okay, so Shishti, when it comes to the student clubs at Booth, I'm guessing you were part of the consulting club. It goes without saying. So apart from that, what other clubs were you a part of, and if you had any other leadership roles in those clubs, what was it like?
Yeah, so there's so many clubs, and it was so difficult to choose which club to join when I first started. I joined the Net Impact Club, which was a club for people who were interested in social impact. I'd written about that in my essay as well, pre-Booth, and that was an area that I wanted to explore professionally and personally, like look for opportunities to volunteer and look for professional opportunities as well. I really really liked that club. Went to a few dinners, went to a conference as well, and it just helped me meet like-minded people who also wanted to just have more of a social impact rather than just sort of think about like I guess making money or living a comfortable life. So it was interesting to then hear like alternative perspectives of how people would enter that industry or what their ambitions were like. And that club sort of facilitated a lot of events, so so you could meet those people. And then I also led the media, entertainment, and sports group. And even though I'm not going back to the media industry, I still feel really passionate about services and products that make people happy or that, like lighten up people's day. And so, yeah, I chose to lead that club. We organized a trek to LA for people to meet companies like Disney, Warner Brothers, etc. We had a few social nights at bars, etc. So it was just a great way for people to meet again, like other people who are interested in recruiting in the same industry. And then, yeah, another club that I joined just for fun was the Epicurean Club, because Chicago has a lot of good restaurants, and we also have a club at Booth that's about going to all of these restaurants. So if you're into like wine or just food, then Epicurean or Wine Club are two great clubs to join. Yeah.
Thank you.
So, Srishti, what advice do you have for Booth aspirants now that you've completed your journey?
Yeah, biggest piece of advice is to really think about as you write your essay, like why you want to go to business school and be honest, be truthful to yourself, like about what business school or what Booth or any other school can, how Booth or any other school can help you get there. I do notice like some people like just think that the essay is all fluff, or just like they think that the essay is just, I don't know. I've had people like come up to me and be like, oh, but like the essay doesn't really matter, right? You can just sort of write something and then not do it while you're at Booth, or just, like trying to please the admission officers. But they read like thousands of essays, so they can see through that. So, for example, I really thought about what I wanted to do at Booth. And so I wrote about taking the artificial intelligence class. I looked up the professor and I actually took that class. I tried to get time with the professor. It's too bad that he was too busy, but like I took that class and participated. I also wanted to explore social impact. And so I joined the club. I took a class, a social sector strategy class, and I also volunteered with a nonprofit in Chicago. So like really deeply think about how the school is going to help you get to your short-term and long-term goals. And instead of thinking of it as fluff or something that you're not going to do once you're at the school, like think of it, take it seriously, and then the admission officers will sort of see that as well. So just be your authentic self. That's my biggest piece of advice.
Okay, so on that note, I think maybe we can take a few questions quickly from the chat. So let me just go through some. I think some of them have been covered previously in the questions, so I'm going to skip those for now. So this is an interesting question. So this is by Sandeep. So he asked, with the benefit of hindsight, what do you think was a key opportunity missed by you and or your peers during the 2 years at Booth?
Ooh, I don't know if the hindsight has kicked in just yet. I just graduated. Key opportunity missed by me. I mean, there are so many good classes. I guess I could always take more interesting classes. That sounds so nerdy. Sounds, but yeah, I think I did do I did do two Booth trips or treks. I did one that went to Japan last year, and then I did a ski trip, and I did a random walk. So I did three. But I would have liked to do one of those really adventurous trips, like the Kilimanjaro trek or the Patagonia trek. And I think those are the trips where you make the best of friends, because you're in like a really uncomfortable environments. And then you just sort of lean on people around you, and you can be authentic. And so I think if, in hindsight, I should have done one of those more adventurous treks. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. So we have an interesting question by Numaya. So in terms of very flexible school, you don't have a lot of core classes. That means you're always meeting new people in new classrooms every single time. So does that make it difficult to meet new people and make friendships? And how did you meet the people that you eventually became close to?
Yeah, so I think that can make it difficult. But so it doesn't become difficult, Booth actually does offer a trip in the beginning of the MBA, and those are called random walk treks or random walks. Most of the class goes on the treks, if I'm not wrong. I'm not sure what the percentage is. So your first friends are usually formed on those trips. So they're like trips of 15 to 20 people with 4 second years and a large group of first years. So you get to meet like some second years who tell you more about the Booth community, and you also get to meet some people from your class. And those people usually become your sort of lifelong friends, or first friends at Booth. And then I think you also tend to meet people through events and clubs. That's the second biggest way, right? So I made some really good friends through the Net Impact Club, and through the media and entertainment group. So it is difficult, but if you make an effort, you join those trips in the beginning of the MBA, or you join some clubs and show interest in people, then it's not as difficult. But definitely in the classroom, it can be difficult, because you do have your classmates in the classroom are constantly changing. Yep.
Thank you. So maybe a couple more questions. So there's a question by Akash, which he asks, what was the rationale behind choosing management consulting as a career path?
Yeah, so I think for me, I just wanted to be able to more specifically be able to sort of work with industries that are lagging behind in the technology or technological stack, and sort of just very behind compared to, you know, big tech or like the companies that are leading the change. I wanted to be able to like work with those industries and consult them with my sort of skills in technology and strategy, and then eventually, like after 2 years or after a few years in consulting, then either I would want to work in a more strategic role in a startup, or something to do with policy, tech and policy, which is also a very growing sort of area. So I thought consulting would give me sort of a good grounding in I guess how the different industries think about technology, and you know, it would give me good exit opportunities either in strategy or in policy roles. So that's why I thought it made sense.
Okay. So having spoken about consulting, what about the branches apart from consulting? When it comes to finance or marketing, maybe your friends and your peers who got placed in different companies, how has the school helped them get to their dream jobs?
So I would say that for the more traditional MBA career paths, that is investment banking, consulting, yeah, I would say those two are like very, very well planned out and very well laid out. Once you join the school, you have the investment banking club and consulting group, and you pretty much, if you just follow what they say and really put the work in, then you will usually get an offer. Then for the non-structured career paths, for example, investment management, so more like investing roles or venture capital, or tech, you know, like just in tech strategic roles or startup recruiting, that is much harder. That is definitely, like, I've had friends who are recruiting for those roles, and yeah, that's not easy. The school can only take you so far, and then it is up to you to use the resources really well, like, which means either contacting alums in those companies or doing, like, you know, your own personal outreach even to people who may not be Booth alums or who may just be in the company. So those take a lot of work, but it is possible. Like, I have seen, you know, people go to companies where there's no Boothie. For example, I know a friend who went to TikTok full time, and that's not a very, you know, like, it's not a lot of Boothies recruiting into TikTok. So it is very possible, but it's definitely difficult.
So the website of the school mentions the Chicago approach, the methodology of teaching. So what exactly is the Chicago approach, and can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, so the Chicago approach is just being super sort of analytical. So I guess it's hard to sort of explain it, but you do really see it when you're discussing things with people or attending class, that it's not, how do I say this? It's not all like fluff, or people do really put a lot of thought into every point they make, or they really try to substantiate that argument with, you know, like with reasoning that makes sense. Now it's hard for me to compare that to other schools because, again, I haven't attended classes in other schools, but I would say you really like see that in class and with people that you meet, that it feels like it's less fluff and people have, yeah, thought through. But again, hard for me to compare. This is my understanding of it. Take it with a pinch of salt.
Okay, thank you. So maybe on a since you mentioned Japan, your trip. So what was the trip like, and what was your best memory from there? And
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Yeah, the trip was organized after a couple years. I mean, Japan was, I think, Akshay, you know, Japan was closed for a long time. And so the trek used to be a regular thing, but then it stopped for a couple years and then it came back my second year. So it was a super, super interesting cultural experience because it was organized by people who had lived in Japan before, like Japanese and non-Japanese. And I think favorite part of the trip was attending a talk in Hiroshima by a survivor. And I think that was like, I think she was like 90 plus years old, and she had survived the whole nuclear bombing, and she really spoke to us about her experience, and it really spoke to me about resilience and really sort of um, being resilient. Like the whole city just felt so resilient after such a big event had struck it. And so I think that was a really cool experience that wouldn't have happened if I'd gone to Japan just by myself. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay. Okay. Maybe one last question from the chat again. It's from Numaya. It's about how difficult things are for internationals to get jobs in the non-consulting or non-finance roles from an
Okay.
point of view.
Okay. So non-consulting and okay, that really varies because yes, so for bigger tech companies, for example, most of them do sponsor. Like I would imagine that TikTok does sponsor like the H-1B visa, and is very open to internationals, but it can be difficult or harder for smaller companies. Or for some certain companies, like I don't know if it was Deloitte or EY, like that just stopped sponsoring internationals randomly. Um, so I would say that yeah, I think you have to do your research for the industry that you're looking at, because I'm not super familiar. But especially if you're looking at startups, I would be mindful and do some research before starting the MBA, just so you know like what the landscape is like and can better prepare for it. Um, but it can be a problem for sure. I have heard people say that, no internationals. It's just visa issues in every country. It's just how it is.
Yeah. So maybe on a closing note, do you have any parting words for the tribe in terms of just the MBA journey itself, and what maybe some pointers to look out for, or something that in retrospect you wish you knew when you were applying?
Yeah, I think I think you're already on the right path, right? Talking to people is the best way to keep yourself informed. So just attending talks like this and other sort of talks is a great way to just to learn about each school and know the process a little bit better. And then apart from that, just sort of being really mindful about why you're applying for an MBA, right? Like you just need to know, like, if you want to apply to an MBA to move to the US, like, how feasible is that? Like, are companies sponsoring for your industry, etc.? And why are you doing an MBA? Like really, like being true to yourself, like not just jumping on the bandwagon. Like it is very easy. Like it is very tempting to just do what other people do. So again, like if you're not clear about your goals, when you go into school, it will be even more confusing because you'll have hundreds of people recruiting for consulting or banking. And then you have to just be super clear before you go to school, because otherwise you'll just get swayed by this and by that. So I would just say, just be mindful, write down your goals and what you want to achieve. And then you will be more successful during your time at the MBA as well. Yeah, and good luck.
Thank you. So once again, I'd like to thank you for taking time out today and just interacting with all of us. And it was really insightful. And I would also like to ask Ashta and Amar if you guys have anything to say, and any closing remarks for Shrishti and everyone. Please go ahead.
So we are really thankful to you, Shrishti. I mean, the whole community, on the behalf of whole community, we are thanking you. You took out your time and you were so prompt in terms of your responses to our emails and everything.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
thank you for having me. No, I
yeah,
really enjoyed talking to you guys about this.
yeah. I mean, and honestly, your opinion, I mean, your insights have been like really straightforward and honest. So really thankful to you. Thank you so much, Shrishti.
Yeah, thank you guys. Good luck.
Thank you so much, Srishti. Thanks for your time.
Have a great Sunday.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye.
All of you have a nice day.